Good afternoon, Cherries fans, and welcome to this video here on Up the Cherries in all departments. Now, before I do get stuck into the topic, I do need to mention our sponsors, Dental on the Banks. You can find out more about them on dentalonthebanks.co.uk. So, I was lucky enough the other day to speak to Tony Cottee and Mark Saggers again on Talk TV, and we had a real detailed conversation about the West Ham game, but also the recent results, and of course Gary O'Neill. Gary O'Neill has been a subject that a lot of AFC Bournemouth fans have discussed recently, and I've always been quite an ardent supporter of Gary. To be honest, on Sunday he did get it wrong against West Ham. It was a very, very disappointing result, but at the same time, we do need to think of where we've come from and what the expectations were at the start of the season. So if you look at the table at the moment, of course, we are 5 points above the drop zone. So that gap has been narrowed by only just 1 point. You've got to also look at the games that teams have got coming up. So Everton have got a really difficult game coming up against Newcastle United very soon. Nottingham Forest have got a bad run in as well. So you've got to consider that. Leicester and Everton have got to also play each other as well in this run in. So there's a lot that could certainly happen. At this moment in time, there was a piece on the BBC website actually the other day, and they were detailing exactly what each team's points, where they need to really get to. And it was a really, really interesting piece. Before we do that, here's the bit from Mark Saggers and Tony Cottee, and thank you again to them for inviting me on Talk TV. It's always a pleasure to go on there.
It's been a very busy first hour of the programme. Delighted to speak to Theo and Lee about Newcastle and Spurs, and before that all the drama for Brighton against Manchester United. Manchester United playing City now in the final of the FA Cup this season. One other big game today would have been headline makers on many other occasions. Bournemouth 0, West Ham United 4. West Ham, what a week they've had after beating Ghent to get through in the Europa Conference League, and things going well for them now at the right time at this stage of the season, and I know that will have delighted David Moyes. Craig Beazley is the Bournemouth blogger for Up the Cherries in all departments, of course. Craig, it's good to see you as always. And Tony Cottee is with us as well, former top striker with West Ham United. Tony, good to see you too. I'm going to start with you, Tony, if I may, tonight. You know, this is just the sort of week, really, that the whole club have been waiting for.
Been waiting all season for it, Saggers. Yeah, it's been a difficult season. I remember talking to you about 4 or 5 months ago, explaining all what was going on, and Martin Noble missing from the dressing room, lots of players coming into the club. It's been a difficult season, but I think with the victory today, I didn't see the game, Saggers, I've got to be honest, because I was working. I didn't see it. But fantastic result, you know, as the goals kept coming in. Probably a little bit overshadowed by Newcastle, I might add. But, yeah, it was a wonderful result. And what it does mean, although West Ham are not safe, it does look like with the extremely good goal difference, it looks like they maybe need one more win, they'll be safe. And, of course, Europe to look forward to as well coming up.
The other thing as well, before I come to you, Craig, David Moyes can again look round that dressing room and know that he's getting the message across still. And for me, I know at times this season there have been calls for him to go, but looking at some of these other clubs that have knee-jerked in all divisions late on in the season to get rid of their man, it's not happening that way these days. Premier League football is a different game these days now, and I think for the bosses to hold on to David has actually worked for them.
I agree, Saggers. Yeah, I mean, I think it's only Forest, isn't it, down in that bottom half who haven't changed their manager as well as West Ham. And I keep saying there's a little bit of frustration at the London Stadium. You know, a lot of my friends and family are West Ham, and quite a few of them have been moaning, and it's time for David Moyes to go, etc. Which is all well and good. Everyone's entitled to opinion, but it always comes down to the same thing. Or it's all right getting rid of Moyesy. Who do you replace him with? Because it's not that easy, and we've seen, you know, various clubs that, you know, Tottenham and Chelsea immediately spring to mind. You get rid of the manager and you haven't got an immediate replacement. And the position West Ham are in, I think they deserve great credit, the ball, because they've stuck with their manager. it's proved, so far it's been a good decision. And if West Ham were to go on and win the Conference League, Saggers, and stay in the Premier League, which they have to, everyone will look back. They'll forget about the Premier League season and say what a wonderful season it is because they've won a European trophy.
No, exactly that, Craig. It's been tight for Bournemouth as well this season, and it's been a little up and down. But again, really, apart from today, didn't quite see this one coming like this, did you?
No, to be honest, after the Spurs win, which was a fantastic result, we winning 3-2 at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium last week. A fantastic result, and I thought we might be able to kick on from that point. To be honest, West Ham was the West Ham of old today, the West Ham of last season. We weren't at the races, though, and we did make it too easy. We didn't cope with the balls flying from deep into our box. I think Jack Stevens had a bit of an off day. Metham struggled a little bit. You've got to give West Ham credit, though. Mikel Antonio and Jared Bowen Mikel Antonio is a menace up front. He really is a menace up front. And you can see why West Ham have done so well in the Europa Conference League. And I think, that without, and here's a question for you, Tony, without the distraction, do you think that West Ham would be they'd be at the right end of the league, I'm sure?
Well, possibly they would be having a better season, but I think there's been a lot of reasons I've explained before why West Ham have had an off season, and it is difficult for a club like West Ham. I think it's difficult for any club, but we've seen many clubs over the year, they qualify for the Europa League and then they end up in relegation trouble because they don't have the squad to deal with the Thursday, Sunday. And it is tough for the players as well. And the other thing as well, David Moyes is very loyal to his player to the point where he likes to play the same team, which is all well and good. But as we know, if you're playing all that amount of games, the players get tired. And I think we've seen that recently, although there's been a real improvement in form. I've got to say as well, I think Bournemouth have had a wonderful season and they perhaps have already done enough to stay up. They probably need, like West Ham, one more win. And if Bournemouth stay up after all what happened with Scott Parker, Gary O'Neill's done a fantastic job. And they've done amazing, Bournemouth. They really have.
I still think as well, and Gary O'Neill said this too, when you mentioned Antonio there, Tony, when West Ham play this direct football, they've got threats from everywhere going forward as well. And I think it's the way that they feel much more comfortable.
Yeah, I agree. And, Antonio, he's had a few injuries. He's sort of been in and out of the team at times. Skamaka's been injured for quite a while now. Danny Ings has obviously arrived from Villa and he's sort of settling into the club. But West Ham have got really good options up front. But you always seem to come back to Antonio. I think with the power and the strength he's got, when he's on his game, he's so difficult to contain. And I think most of the reason is because I think most of the time Mickey doesn't know what he's trying to do, let alone anyone else. You couldn't possibly, anticipate what Antonio's going to do. He's a wonderful player to watch. And when he's on his game, he's a real handful. And West Ham's highest ever Premier League goal scorer. Not bad for someone who arrived as a right back from Forest, I might add.
No, exactly that. He always does make something happen. And very clever in the way that he does it too. Gary O'Neill, he deserves to carry on, I think, doesn't he, if you stay up?
I'm a big supporter of his and, he's done very, very well considering what he took over after that 9-0 thrashing at Liverpool. And what he did initially was get that team working together. After a 0-0 draw against Wolves at that point might not have sounded an exciting result, but it was something to build upon. And we've had some fantastic results of late. Beat Fulham from 1-0 down. Of course, the win against Spurs. Beating Leicester as well. So it's a blip in the road. But at the end of the day, any manager, and to be honest, Gary O'Neill has come under a lot of criticism from the Bournemouth fans. And I don't understand it because a lot of people were saying, what about Marcelo Bielsa? What about Kjell Knutsen? There's no guarantees that those two managers would have done any better than Gary O'Neill. Gary knew the club, and I think he's done a fantastic job. We did have, and most pundits had us down to go be a bad bottom, really.
Yeah. Craig, you make some good points there. Tony, I just want to ask you this one, though, finally. if I may, particularly about what's happening to the sides like Spurs and one or two others here at the moment. It's not always about, I don't think, the whole time, the glamorous foreign managers coming in and all the big players. At times, you need also people who know their way around the club that they're joining.
Yeah, I agree. And Craig probably won't like me mentioning, but you've only got to look at Eddie Howe at Newcastle and look at the job he's done, because the clamour there was, let's get in this top manager and this manager. And, it just shows you that we do have some real talent.
Well, they've all nearly disappeared, though, now. This is the other problem we've got, isn't it, Tony? They've gone because everybody thinks it's fashionable to have these top guys that might come in for a season, but if it isn't working for them, they're gone.
No, exactly. And, Eddie Howe, Gary O'Neill's done a great job there. David Moyes done a good job at West Ham. There are some talented British managers. The answer is not always a top, foreign coach. It doesn't always work. They don't always get it. They come in, they spend lots of money, and they leave, and then the club has to pick up the pieces behind it. So there is a lot to be said for the stability. Give Gary O'Neill a chance. Stick with David Moyes. Two fantastic football clubs, and hopefully both are going to be playing Premier League football again.
Exactly. Lovely to talk to you as always, Tony. In a word, Craig, because we're out of time, you staying up?
Yes.
Excellent. That's what I wanted to hear. We're off to the Championship next, and we'll be talking Wrexham and Tony Incenso's Queen's Park Rangers. You're listening to the Sunday Night Club here on Talk TV. Got lots more to come as well before Howard Hughes at 10.
So you've heard what Tony said. He thinks Gary O'Neill has done a very, very good job. I do. Of course, that has also been echoed by Sam Matterface on TalkSport, and also Jamie Carragher in the Sky Sports studio on Monday Night Football. And I think personally, they're all correct. Gary has done a very, very good job. Consider where we've come from. When Gary took over, we'd just been beaten 9-0 by Liverpool. A very, very poor result. However, what he did was he got that draw straight after against Wolves. Now, that might not have been the most exciting of games, but it was something to build upon. And then he built upon that, he did. So, against Nottingham Forest, we was 2-0 down, 1-3-2. That already showed the sort of eagerness and the sort of determination that he instilled into this side, and straight, after what was a very, very poor result previously. So what the BBC have actually done is they've actually bought in a data specialist company called Nielsen's Gracenote. And they've studied the stats and judged each team's chances of being relegated based on the remaining fixtures. So looking at this, at this moment in time, AFC Bournemouth have a 7% chance of relegation. The points per match in the last 10 games is 1.5. Now that is equal with West Ham, who beat us, of course, on Sunday. You look at the other teams in that mix. So Leicester have 0.4. Now I expect that would increase because, of course, Dean Smith has just come into the club. Everton have got 1, as have Leeds. Wolves have got 1.1. Crystal Palace, funny enough, have got 0.5, but of course that's increased because of Roy Hodgson going into the club there as well. The bottom two, though, Nottingham Forest are on the worst. They're 0.3, and Southampton are 0.9. Southampton's chances of relegation look pretty much confined. 89% is what Gracenote has actually said. Nottingham Forest are said to be 78% chance of relegation, Everton 51%, and Leicester 33%. Leeds, in fact, although they have got a point extra, are on 41% chance of relegation. I guess that has got something to do with their running as well. So, just having a quick look at the chances and how many points we really need. So this was also broken down, and at the moment we are on 33 points. Now 33 points is the chance of safety is 26%. So that's not particularly very high, but if we do win one more game, that goes up to 94%. And one game won and a draw So say, for example, if we get 4 points in the next 2 games, that goes up to 99%. 37 points is 99%, and 38 or more is 100% chance of safety. To be honest, 38 has always been the golden number. It is 1 point per game. I think that's what we've got to aim for, but we should be okay with 37 or 36 as well, according to this. So we still do have a little bit of work to do. However, I personally think that the other teams in that battle are going to really, really struggle. So Southampton, for example, bottom of the league, 24 points, were fairly unlucky against Arsenal. Got to be said, but Arsenal weren't at their top. Of course, they have to play us on Thursday night. They've also got Newcastle away and Forest away. That's a 6-pointer for them. But other than that, Fulham at home, so a team who might be picking up results. Don't know if Mitrovic will be back by that point. I'm guessing he probably will be. Brighton away, that's not going to be easy. And Liverpool at home. So that's Southampton's running. Honestly, I think they're going to struggle to get to 33 on that. So our point tally at the moment. Stranger things have happened. If we remember back to what Fulham did years ago, that was in 2007, 2008, they actually pulled themselves out. They were actually relegated at half time against Manchester City and managed to stay up after beating Portsmouth on the last game of the season. So that really signifies that they can and do that. So that's the first team. I think personally, Southampton will really, really struggle to get out that. But Forest have got really the running from hell. They've got Brighton, Brentford, both sides very, very good this season. Southampton at home is going to be a 6-pointer for them as well. Chelsea, Arsenal, and Crystal Palace can't see them getting out of it. Used 33 players this season, more than any other team. They really have struggled. They're the only team in the relegation battle without a win in the last 10 Premier League matches. So I think they're going to be struggle to get out of that. And 78%. Everton are the big, interesting one. Of course, Everton haven't been relegated since the 1950s. And, a lot of fans and a lot of Premier League neutrals will feel quite sad to see them go down. However, this is quite an interesting fact. Frank Lampard has actually did a fairly decent job at the start of the season. Dyche, since the World Cup break, really hasn't improved the side that much. It has, improved slightly. Of course, they got that win against Arsenal straight off. And they have had wins over Leeds and Brentford as well. But they are struggling, and the next game is at home to Newcastle. They've got Leicester away, which again is a 6-pointer. Brighton away, which is going to be difficult. Man City, where they're not going to win that, and then they've got 2 6-pointers at the end of the season. Wolves, and then of course ourselves. I don't want it to come down to that last game of the season, especially if we go on a horrible run. So fingers crossed, we can make sure that we're clear of this battle and safe by that point. I think Leicester will be absolutely fine, 33%. They've got Leeds away, Everton at home, Fulham away, Liverpool at home, Newcastle away, and West Ham at home. They've probably got the easiest running of the teams that are in direct danger. So I think Leicester as well under Dean Smith will be okay. I think, to be honest, they're in a position which, surprises me. I didn't expect them to be down there, but one team I did expect to be down there, one team I expected to go down. And in fact, I still think Everton will surpass them, is Leeds United. Of course, our opponents on Sunday. So, of course, sacked Jesse Marsh earlier on in the season. Was never really a big fan of his, but to be honest, he spoke well, did, I think he did a fairly decent job with what he was given. But, of course, they've now got Javi Garcia now in charge. They haven't got a particularly nice running, albeit they have got Tottenham thrown in there. And Tottenham are a bit of a crisis club. Of course, sacked Stellini yesterday, so we shall see how that all pans out. But they've got Leicester at home and us away. So, of course, those two are 6 pointers for Leeds, because after that they've got Man City, Newcastle, West Ham, who are in exceptionally good form now, and Tottenham Hotspur at home. I think realistically, we only need another 4 points. I wouldn't rely on the 3. Another 4 points should see us safe. However, stranger things have happened, and I think we just got to keep going until it is mathematically safe. Our running isn't awful. Southampton away, Leeds at home. Of course, Chelsea at home is, well, we are Chelsea's bogey team. Palace away. Hopefully, Palace will be on the beach by that time. Man City, Manchester United, I apologise, at home. We don't want to play Man City again. Manchester United at home. And, of course, that big one against Everton away at the end of the season. So, personally, I think we're okay. But why I've done this video is to talk about Gary O'Neill and what he inherited. Personally, if we had Scott Parker in charge of this football club at this point in time, I think we would be where Southampton are. I honestly do. Because, firstly, we played too defensively. We played too far back. You saw that against Liverpool. We played too defensively. They played in front of us. They picked us off at ease. That does not work in the Premier League. It's not what worked for us beforehand. Eddie Howe always used to go for the juggler, and that's what we actually lost. So I think Gary O'Neill has changed the philosophy there and changed it successfully, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. He's come under a lot of criticism. The form after the World Cup wasn't particularly good, but at the same time, there was a lot of injuries in that side. We was missing Tavernier. We was missing Solanke at times. We were struggling. We were struggling because of the amount of injuries that we had. Nottingham Forest have got a similar sort of problem where they've had quite a lot of injuries, and again they're struggling. And of course, McKenna now is out for the rest of the season for Nottingham Forest. So I think that's going to be a big blow, and probably too big a blow now for them going into the last 6 games of the season. I think personally, Gary O'Neill has done an exceptional job. I thought what I would do is come with statistics, today, rather than, coming at you with a load of, a load of, passionate pleas just to get behind the manager. But the truth of the matter is he's got 30 points across this Premier League season. So he's done exceptionally well. He's very, very close to that 30 point per game mark, point per game ratio. In fact, he's superseded it. Because, of course, the first 4 games of the season were under Scott Parker. So in 28 games, he's got 30 points for the side. Also, you've got to take into account 9 of those goals were under Scott Parker. Of course, that was against Liverpool, plus another 3 against Arsenal. That puts it up to, I'm trying to now work out the maths, 12, and then another 4 against Manchester City. So that's 16 goals that we shipped in those first games. Now, I'm not saying that we would have got draws in those 3 games if, we was under Gary O'Neill. I'm not that stupid. However, if you knock 16 off that, we would have been on minus 16 goal difference. That's not a bad place to be. So minus 16 goal difference, not bad at all. Okay, we probably would have lost all 3 of those games. So let's call it minus 20. But that wouldn't have been awful. That would have been better than Leeds. That would have been better than Everton, a lot better than Forest, and better than Southampton. So I think we've got to be realistic what we expected at the start of the season. The expectation was to survive relegation. And Gary O'Neill has done that. He's also done that with a side who a lot would have thought, and a lot said, we're going to finish bottom of the league. It's only since, the January window, he's been able to have and utilise new players. Players like Dango Atara, players like Hamid Traore and Vina, and players like that. It's only since then he's been able to bring in these new bodies who have helped the club move forwards. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for that, because I think, earlier on in the season, we did have probably a weaker side. I wouldn't like to say, and I don't want to knock our team, because I think, they worked their socks off last season. I think they were badly directed in some games. I could talk all day about the Peterborough games, the Derby game, the Reading game, um, Swansea away, until we woke up. That was ridiculous and critical, to be fair. But there were so many games that we could actually refer back to and say, look, these are the games where we messed up. We could have won that title. 37 points out the first 15 games was no mean feat. And it was so only when Scott Parker started to tinker with it where it started to fall apart. I think we saw that against Luton, where we did win, but against Luton, I think we started to tinker with it, and that was the start of where it just started to slowly descend a little bit into the Championship. But hand on heart, I personally think that Gary O'Neill is the right man. I think he is the man at this moment in time to take the club forward. What happens at the end of the season, who knows? Personally, I think Bill Foley will probably want to bring in his own man, a man that maybe who he feels can take us to the next level, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But Gary O'Neill is not a PE teacher. He's not a clown. He is a man who's actually come into this club when we were on our lowest ebb, when Scott Parker had been sacked for what he had actually said, and pulled it off the ground. I come out of that game against Liverpool and I felt so dejected, so disappointed. I couldn't see a way out because of the way we set up against Liverpool. We just went too defensive. It looked horrific. It was incredibly disappointing. I'm sure anybody who was there, at the end of the game, it was soul destroying. We expected to go there, get beat. It was a day out. We had our fingers crossed that we could get something and could surprise and upset the odds, but it didn't happen. But it was the manner that it happened in. From that point, and to where we are now, I kind of didn't expect it. I would like to have thought that we would have been competitive, but at that point, I didn't really think that we were going to be. However, we are in this. We are literally a matter of 4-5 points away from safety. And we've got to get behind the manager, got to get behind the team, got to really support and back this football club. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we can get across the line. Please do share your thoughts on Gary O'Neill. Do you think he'll be here next season? Please, no clown remarks, no stupid PE teacher remarks. He's done a fantastic job. And fingers crossed, against Southampton at St Mary's on Thursday night, we can get 3 points to actually make sure that we are that close to safety. And I'm sure even the most critical Bournemouth fan, the fan that doesn't really particularly like Gary O'Neill, will surely say he's done a good job. That's all from me. Let me know what you think. Signing out, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you for joining us.